Okay, so I'll continue giving like a little summary of some of the topics covered at the monastic conference that we just returned from. So the first presentation was by Bhikkhu Bodhi, a very well-respected American monk who studied in Sri Lanka quite a long time. And he talked about the definition and meaning of Vinaya and how it relates to sila, or ethical conduct, sila being like virtuous conduct in general, and Vinaya referring to the rules and regulations for monastics. So those rules, he uses the word rules, I don't like that word, which is, we talked a lot about using guidelines, trainings, other words instead, which I prefer. But how the Vinaya, by keeping the Vinaya, then one kept sila, one created virtuous conduct. And then he also was saying that there's two kinds of, what was it? Two kinds of, of precepts or trainings. So one was fundamental to the spiritual life, so those regarded actions, basically the ones that were naturally negative, you know, that whoever did them would be committing or creating non-virtue, and whatever other actions might be really fundamental to having a spiritual life. And then the other precepts were ones that regarded conventional behavior and being courteous, having etiquette, and so on. And so those were not necessarily those in general weren't naturally negative, but were just things that it didn't look good if the Sangha did. And so these are related to the different reasons why the Buddha set down precepts. You might remember in our previous EML, we've talked about 10 reasons why the Buddha set down the precepts. Well, 2 of those 10 were regarded to inspire faith in those who don't have faith and to increase the faith in those who do. And so, you know, if the Sangha keeps, avoids naturally negative actions, certainly it accomplishes that. But also the Sangha must keep conventional behavior and etiquette. Otherwise, if we don't, then the laity lose respect and confidence in the Sangha. Okay, and so that's why we have so many small trainings here at the Abbey about what may seem like small, picky things, but actually what they do is they provide what Lama Yeshe used to say is a good visualization for the lay people. Okay, whereas the trainings that are fundamental to the spiritual life, we should, really do our best to keep at all costs, because if we abrogate those, we're going against our own spiritual aspirations. We're making obstacles for ourselves as well as for others. He also talked about whether the Buddha about whether we can change different trainings, different guidelines. And he said that the scriptures don't speak with a uniform voice about this. That in, one place the Buddha said, if the monastics don't change any of the trainings, any of the precepts, then the Sangha will flourish, the Dharma will flourish. But then he also told Ananda, when he was nearing his parinirvana, that the Sangha could change the trainings and guidelines if the Sangha wishes. Of course, at the first council after the Buddha's parinirvana, when the 500 arhats got together to discuss this, they couldn't decide which ones were minor rules that could be changed and which ones weren't. So then Mahakassapa, who tended to be very, very strict and very ascetic, he said, let's not change anything, because otherwise the people will say when the Buddha was alive, the Sangha kept everything strictly, but when he passed away, then they started acting any old which way. So you can see, that has a purpose. But then on the other hand, the Buddha himself changed different things. And he would set down a general procedure about how to handle a situation, and then another situation would occur and he would change that, sometimes make it stricter, sometimes make exceptions. Very often when his disciples were living in an area that had a different climate or a different culture, then the specifics, the legalities for keeping certain trainings would be changed according to the climate and the culture. So you see the Buddha himself changed things. So, it's this kind of puzzle because, we get both sides in the scriptures themselves. At one point, the Buddha really talked about not abrogating any of the trainings, even at the even at the risk of your life. Yeah. But then at another point, he talks about a monastic who keeps the fundamental trainings well, but has offenses regarding the minor ones, and how those minor offenses can be fixed and repaired and purified through the proper procedures. So that kind of implies that the ones that we shouldn't breach, even at the risk of our lives, are the fundamental ones, that are really important for the spiritual life. So then, what are the fundamental ones? Well, in general, we could say, all of the naturally negative actions. But then killing an insect is a naturally negative action. But does that mean if you kill an insect, you've really ruined the fundamental basis of your spiritual life? No, it doesn't seem so. Okay, so it seems more that the parajikas, for the monks, the 4 defeats, for the nuns, the 8 defeats. In other words, the specific trainings that if you go beyond their limits, you lose your ordination, you're out of the Sangha. So it seems like those are the ones that are really fundamental to the spiritual life. It's not even all naturally negative actions. Okay. So there's just a lot to think about here. Yeah, and a lot of this applies to our modern day situation in terms of how do we keep the trainings, given that our society is so different, our climate is so different, the system of governance and our economic system are so different here than in ancient India. Okay, and so that gets into what I talked about in my talk, but that'll come a little bit later. So I think that's enough for today.